החויסה ניסים לכל הבויתחים בוי ניסים לכל הבויתחים בוי הוא יסבור החויסה ניסים לכל הבויתחים בוי אויסה ניסים לכל הבויתחים בוי הוא יסבור החויסה ניסים לכל הבויתחים בוי היו יסבור החויסה ניסים לכל הבויתחים בוי
Hello everyone. One of the questions that are asked about Chanukah, maybe not asked enough, is how much money do you have to spend on Chanukah candles? Namely, if someone is in, unfortunately, not such a great financial situation, what should he or she do? So, in general, we have a rule. And that rule was one of the takanot, one of the enactments of a place called Usha. The Gemara in Ketubot of Nun Amud Aleph says, "Hamebazbez al yebazbez yoter michomesh." Namely, when you go and put out money for a mitzvah, it cannot be more than a fifth, 20%, of your general earnings. And that's paskin in the Ramah about a mitzvah d'oraisa, about a biblical mitzvah. Misha ein lo etrog, if someone doesn't have an etrog, say for the first day of Sukkot when it's biblical, or shar mitzvah overet, or any other mitzvah that is going to pass you by. Etrog is only for the first day, rabbinically for the rest of the holiday of Sukkot, namely 7 days altogether minus Shabbos. Ein sarich lebazbez alea hon rab. You don't have to put out so much money. Ukemosha amru, as they said in the Gemara, hamebazbez al yebazbez yoter michomesh, up to 20%. Well, if that's the case, why is that not lend itself to Chanukah? When it comes to Chanukah, the Shulchan Aruch paskins, ve'afilu aniya mitparnes min hatzdaka, even someone that's poor and his whole livelihood comes from tzedakah, shoel umocher ktzuto velokeach shemen lahadlik. He has to either borrow the money or he has to even sell the shirt on his or her back in order to fulfill the mitzvah of lighting Chanukah candles. Why is this any different? Why is this mitzvah different from, say, etrog? And let's sharpen the question. Etrog is a mitzvah d'oraisa on the first day. Chanukah is only the Rabbanan, it's only rabbinic. And yet, with Chanukah, you have to even sell your shirt to fulfill the mitzvah. Etrog, up to 20%. We can answer this question in one of two ways. As usual, general and specific. So let's start with the general. Comes along the Magid Mishneh. His years 1300 to 1370, a good friend of the Ran, always tries to explain hard Rambams, and he comes along and says the following words, that indeed, with regard to Chanukah, as well as with regard to the 4 cups of wine, in which the Mishnah says that even someone that's poor has to make sure to have 4 cups of wine at the Seder, ve'afilu min hatamchu, and has to take even from the poor man's kitchen. Any mitzvah that has within it Persume Nisa, the poor person has to do, even to the extent of all his money. In his words, Mashe Katav Rabbeinu Afilu Eino Mashe Yochal, with regard to Chanukah, he wrote, even if he doesn't have what to eat, is the same as the 4 cups of wine, V'hatam Mishum Persume Nisa. Indeed, when you talk about publicizing a miracle, it's different. And since these mitzvot, Chanukah, 4 cups of wine at the Seder, have to do with publicizing the miracle, it has to be public and it has to be even at the expense of all your wallet. Etrog is personal. You shake an etrog, God says up to 20%. But when it's a mitzvah to go ahead and to publicize it to others, then you have to put out all your money. And indeed, the Chanukah candles is not just a mitzvah to publicize to the Jews, it's probably a mitzvah to publicize to all mankind. The Gemara in Shabbos says that you're supposed to make sure that the candles light until shetichle regel minashuk, until the last person is in the marketplace. And then the Gemara asks, Va'ad kama? Well, many people walk at night to take a walk. What are we talking about? Ad dechalia rigla de tarmuda'i. Until the Tarmudaim are no longer there. Explains Rashi that the Tarmudaim would have logs. And at night, if you put on your heat and you ran out of firewood, they would be there until late. So until they go home, you have to make sure your Hanukkah candles are lit. The Talmud Da'im were not Jewish, and yet you have to make sure that you publicize the miracle until they're no longer in the street. Which means when you publicize the miracle, there's different rules and regulations. Number one, you have to indeed go out of your way to put out all your money and even borrow money in order to fulfill it. And number two, it's not just in front of Jews, it's in front of non-Jews. That's the general answer. But number two, there may be a specific answer with regard to Chanukah candles. And that is, what is Chanukah candles all about? Chanukah candles was God making a miracle with the Jewish people for the first time in a long time in the Second Temple. Many miracles didn't occur during the Second Temple. But all of a sudden, that famous miracle with that cask of oil showed that even miracles didn't have a cutoff date, they continue. And specifically with the menorah. The Gemara in Shabbos says, the menorah specifically is a duty liba'e olam shahashchina shora beYisrael. This is the testimony that God's holy presence rests upon the Jewish people. Why? Because the west candle, the Ner Ma'aravi, says the Gemara, you would put in it as much oil as the rest of the candles, but you would light from it like a shamish, from its fire, all the rest of the candles. Namely, from the Ner Ma'aravi, you would light the 6 other candles in the Beit HaMikdash, and still it would light as long as all the rest of the candles. Comes along Rashi and says the miracle was even greater than that. This Ner Ma'aravi, this famous Western candle, Kol Zman Shayu Yisrael Chavivin Hayat Oleh Kol Hayom. Not only would it light all night, it would light all day. And maybe this is the reason when the Rambam says this law that says that even a poor person has to put out all his money in order to fulfill the mitzvah of Chanukah, he starts by saying in this halacha, Perek Dalet halacha Yud Bet, Mitzvot Ner Chanukah, Mitzvah Chaviva, Hi Ad Me'od. It is a very lovable mitzvah. Exactly what Rashi says when he says about that miracle of the Western candle. He uses the word Kol Zman Shehayu Yisrael Chavivin. They were lovable, Hayad Oleh Kol Hayom, with light all day. So indeed, this mitzvah of Chanukah candles, which is taking what was in the Beis HaMikdash and putting it into each and every home, is different because it shows that God's holy presence rests upon us. How do we know? He went out of his way, didn't be pedantic with the Jewish people in order to do a miracle. So we can't be pedantic with our money when we fulfill this mitzvah. If God went out of his way to not be pedantic with us and to make a miracle specifically with these candles. So, indeed, even if you're poor, you have to go out of your way to fulfill this mitzvah of Chanukah. But the question is why? Either generally any mitzvah to go ahead and do Pirsume Nisa, to publicly show the miracle, that's what you got to do, or specifically with the candles, which is the testimony that God is not pedantic with us, we can't be pedantic with our money. He wasn't pedantic with us when he made the miracle. We can't be pedantic when we remember that very same miracle.
גבורים נקבצו לי, הרייביני חשמנים, ופרצו חוי מייסמיק דולי, והקימו כל השמנים. הנה סרקנקני, נסונס, לשוי שני. הנה סרקנקני, נסונס, לשוי שני.